here we are. This is Sex, Love Psychedelics, and I'm your host, Dr. Kat, bringing you psychosexual conversations that will leave you intellectually turned on and hungry for more. And you've brought up this image a couple of times, the Black Brute image, and how that impacts our sexuality, our expression, our touch. Can you expand on that a bit more about what contributed that? You said your grandparents experienced that, and how that relates to this emotion aspect here.
Yeah, the Black Brute narrative is pretty profound to slow it down. In my family structure, is very alive, and it's been dismantled in some ways and examined, but it can't exist without the overculture of America feeding that every day. The most funded image of the Black male body, even to this day, is the Black Brute narrative. To be simple, NFL, Black Brute narrative, NBA, Black Brute narrative, basketball, from football to boxing to UFC, these are all hyper masculine bodies that are, now I'm gonna be very clear, there's nothing wrong with being masculine and being strong, but there's no tears, there's no tenderness, there's no actual mental health assessment of what's actually serving us. It's just like grind your body until it's gone, and we'll talk about how, you know, your mental health and your is kind of the back end. The families pay the price on that. So the Black Brute narrative was born to justify lynching of Black men, right? As much as Black bodies were a commodity and something to sell and to purchase, when slavery ended, we needed a reason to control how to control them, right? How do we control? So they had to tell a story. And some people can probably Google this. It's like you can Google Birth of a Nation, that film, even clips from it, give you a sense of this major blockbuster, first early cinema is a narrative. Is a narrative of how do we tell the story of justifying controlling Black bodies. How do we do that? And so for me, the lynching brute is like, he's a big, large body, muscular, has an unsatiable desire for white women. Not any women per se. Now we've kind of expanded to like this hyper masculine, but back then it was white women, this thing that to protect. And so the only way we can do that is white men have to then either kill, control, or protect in that way. So that's kind of the simple, broad strokes of the Black Brute, and that's still very present today. So that still lived in my narrative, that when I got stronger, as I worked out, as I played football in high school, as I ran track, I got celebrated. As I got more emotional or more tender, I got dismissed. That was a simple, like, where does it go? Where does it go? So for me, we're seeing that now as I'm 41 years old, that we have a society that's asking more questions collectively, but still not tracking the Black Brute near as clearly as I think we can. And so the Black Brute narrative is a very powerful story. It's somewhat complicated, but really not when I look at just like the bare bones of how it's evolved to this stage.
Yeah, there's a really great paper that I'm going to include in the show notes that was written in, it was published in 2019, and it goes through the history of what you're saying with lynching as a way to create the separation and prevent interracial babies that might blur the lines of the white supremacy. And so I'm going to include that in the notes in case anybody wants to dive into that and just really educate themselves on how that's showing up. So as we're thinking about this is in our environment, and it's contributing to, you know, inner feelings of the nervous system feeling, you know, may not feel safe to express our emotions. How were you able to cultivate this skill of expressing your emotions and your tenderness, surrounded by, you know, which you said it wasn't necessary, it wasn't received, or rejection, or like, it's such a vulnerable thing to express our authentic human, full emotional expression. I don't know. Profile, emotional profile.
Now it feels, it's normal. I have it all the time, but I got really blessed with a partner that encouraged it, wasn't confused about who I was, got celebrated. I got really excited, got deeply moved when I showed up as my full complex self. My full emotional profile was seen. So that's a huge advantage, because a lot of men I work with, their partners do not have that capacity. They're still bought into the non-emotional male body, and particularly Black male body. And so it's a little more complicated to create. And I also had siblings. I have two brothers, I have one older, one younger, who also will back my emotional evolution. And so the people closest to me backed it immediately once I decided I'm going in this direction. And then I started building community around it, right? So I started going through song circles and mentees. And so I started nesting, building. I don't understand that people that might not have that ability, access to people, this is much harder. But for myself, that gave me, oh, sorry about that. It's off. And then those phones in here.
I'm going to clap for a moment.
Yeah.
Okay.
That gave me, having a nest of people around me gave me that initial place to start cultivating that thinking, cultivating that culture. And that to me was where I got momentum. So I just got blessed with a handful of 5 people, 6 people that were really surrounding me, saying, Aaron, you can be that. Maybe society's confused. Maybe your people at work might be confused. Maybe right here you can do that. So I got to flush it out, work the muscle, stumble, get overwhelmed, and balance myself. And that ecosystem was so critical. And I was trying to create versions of that for people that I work with. And I try and be a version of that ecosystem. I want to help create other critical mass of Black bodies and bodies, all races too, because I work with a lot of white folks, people in the global majority as a whole. But I prioritize Black male bodies only because I realize it's not a whole lot of us yet that have found each other that are doing this. So I try and be that ecosystem. So you're a complete human being. You're no more valuable. You're no more less sexy. None of those things are a question here when you show up in your full emotional body self. And so that's the thing that was offered to me. And I didn't have language for it. We didn't have like all the vocabulary and website back then. But the idea is that I had those humans. That was way more important than the website at that time. Had those humans that said, I see what's happening. This looks like medicine. I'm not confused. We can back you. That's how I found my way. I think it was a lot harder if I didn't have those critical people early on.
Yeah, these resources, community as a resource for us to be able to touch back in when we go out into a world that doesn't necessarily support authenticity and fullest expression. Well, that was fun. Thanks for tuning in, lovers. And if you want to experience more ecstasy and sexual liberation, head over to sexlovepsychedelics.com and learn about how you can join me for any one of my online or live events. And while you're there, grab my free guide on sex and psychedelics. Remember, this podcast is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Please contact your healthcare provider and local law before pursuing any of the products or psychedelics discussed. And one final note here. I make this show specifically for you. If you're loving the show, then be sure to leave me a review in iTunes or Spotify to let me know. Happy to be here and happy to serve. I'll see you next time on Sex, Love, Psychedelics.